Corporate data is a chaotic flood of information. Organizations capture this volume, compress it, and force it into the most fragile structure, the spreadsheet grid. Enterprises spend millions deploying specialized resource planning systems to safeguard their operations. Yet the critical daily workflows, the actual mechanisms driving quantitative decisions, invariably bypass these systems for ad hoc spreadsheets. This decentralized approach is known as end-user computing. It dominates global workflow execution because it offers extreme agility and practically zero deployment friction. Anyone can open a workbook and start modeling. This chart visualizes empirical data from the European Spreadsheet Risks Interest Group. It displays a 100% total volume of enterprise models. On the right, the bright red indicator reveals that nearly 90% of those operational corporate workbooks contain material errors. The vulnerability is biological. Scaling this chart down to a micro level of a 100-cell grid, notice the 1 to 5 cells pulsing red. Academic research confirms a baseline human cognitive error rate of 1 to 5% for complex tasks. Perfection in manual data entry is biologically impossible. Given the baseline human error rate, relying on unmanaged spreadsheets for enterprise valuation creates a mathematical guarantee of systemic failure. These unmanaged, undocumented models do not exist in a vacuum. They are the exact engines feeding directly into high-stakes regulatory reporting, tax compliance, and multi-million-dollar M&A valuations. Under internal control assessments, like Section 404 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, undocumented spreadsheets represent massive, unmitigated compliance liabilities. To survive an audit, organizations must stop treating workbooks as digital scratchpads. They must be managed with the same rigorous protocols used in software engineering. The Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales engineered a comprehensive solution. This structural blueprint outlines their two-pillar governance stack, a standardized methodology defined by the 20 principles, and an objective hierarchy of human capital defined by the Competency Framework. Navigating modern regulatory scrutiny requires stripping away ad hoc freedom and replacing it with trackable, standardized architectural governance. To understand how this governance functions, we can perform an autopsy on a failed financial model, tracing its flaws from legacy habits to modernized architecture. The corrective lens here is the 20 Principles for Good Spreadsheet Practice, an operational rulebook governing strategy, structure, and control. Look at this legacy framework. Data ingestion relies on physical human action, manual copy-pasting, visual inspection, and saving files with ambiguous names. Contrast that with the modernized approach. Here, data updates bypassed human input, utilizing direct database connectors, native cloud versioning, and automated pipelines. Every manual transcription event, every time a user copies a value from an email and pastes it into a cell, creates a direct pipeline for silent, compounding financial misstatements. Structural integrity begins at the source. The organization must entirely remove human physical touchpoints from the initial data ingestion phase. In a typical unstructured workbook, raw source data and calculation logic are tangled together in the exact same location. Principles 9 and 10 address this directly. They mandate strict functional separation and automated ingestion to cure workbook corruption before it starts. This flow diagram demonstrates the mechanic in action. The raw, messy data blocks are passed through an automated bridge called Power Query. The tool cleans and optimizes the source material, ensuring only uniform data blocks flow into the protected calculation grid. By automating this extraction and transformation, the workflow natively eliminates the 1 to 5% baseline human cognitive error rate from the ingestion process. A resilient financial engine treats data as a strictly controlled incoming current, never as manual input. Once the data is secured, the calculation mechanics must be governed.
Principle 14 enforces a strict prohibition against embedding hard-coded constants, like an interest rate, directly into a mathematical formula. Principle 12 takes this further, requiring calculation logic to remain perfectly consistent across entire contiguous ranges. Copying a formula down 1,000 rows using drag fill introduces the severe risk of invisible variations and downstream corruption. Contrast this with dynamic arrays. A single formula in the top cell instantly spills downward to fill the exact range uniformly without a single cursor drag. Robust formula architecture replaces manual repetition with programmatic logic, ensuring consistency across millions of data points. Structural rules hold no value if the personnel operating the models lack the technical literacy to enforce them. Enterprises face a massive capability crisis driven by the Dunning-Kruger effect. Self-taught spreadsheet users consistently overestimate their technical proficiency, underestimating the sheer complexity of the engines they are building. When human resource departments accept vague resume claims like proficient in Excel, they onboard hidden liabilities directly into their compliance pipelines. The ICAEW created the Spreadsheet Competency Framework. This 4-tier pyramid is an objective skill taxonomy categorizing human capability. The foundational, basic, and general user layers focus on safe data entry and standard reporting. Above them, creators and developers engineer multi-layered calculation engines using advanced toolsets. Mitigating model risk is impossible without an objective verification system. The complexity of the workbook must mathematically match the verified capability of the human operating it. The true power of the framework lies in deployment. All 82 competencies map directly to functional job profiles using a relevance system that separates core, essential skills from beneficial ones. An administrative role focuses purely on accurate data entry. By contrast, an industry accountant requires robust model design and strict standards compliance as their core operational baseline. Notice how this dashboard matrix maps the variations. A financial modeler working in audit lights up completely different nodes. Their core competencies rely entirely on reverse engineering existing logic and stress testing structural assumptions. The framework now accounts for generative artificial intelligence through 6 dedicated competencies. These define the specific skills needed to prompt AI for formula generation and automated cleaning, establishing the strict verification protocols required to validate results against hallucination risks. Functional capability mapping ensures that complex financial engines are assigned exclusively to qualified staff, aligning human resources directly with institutional risk policy. Together, these elements form a continuous closed-loop risk control cycle. The 20 principles dictate policy, the competency framework governs personnel, and the review guidelines mandate the audit. This interlocking ecosystem maps seamlessly onto global model risk management guidelines and satisfies Sarbanes-Oxley internal control requirements. When a model adheres strictly to Principle 17 for embedded error checks and Principle 20 for cell protection, it generates the exact verifiable evidence that external auditors demand. Adopting this ecosystem places end-user computing within a documented, auditable control environment, eliminating the historical blind spots in corporate governance. For enterprise leadership, the implementation mandate is clear. First, execute an enterprise-wide risk assessment to catalog all operational workbooks, ranking them by their direct regulatory and financial impact. Second, institutionalize the 20 principles as mandatory organizational design standards, eliminate manual transcription, and ban hard-coded logic to prevent catastrophic errors. Finally, deploy capability dashboards to evaluate staff, assigning critical model development strictly to personnel verified at the creator or developer levels. Standardizing spreadsheet practices and human capital benchmarks provides the only reliable defense against the mathematical certainty of end-user failure.